This is Kelly, and you're listening to Vote Her In, a collaboration of two broads talking politics and author Rebecca Sive, where we look at the movement to elect our first woman president. Today's guest is Karine Jean-Pierre. Hey everyone, this is Kelly, and you are listening to Vote Her In, which is a collaboration of two broads talking politics and author Rebecca Sive. And this is a podcast where we look at the movement to elect our first woman president and issues related to that. So I am here, as usual, with Rebecca, and Rebecca will introduce our guest today.
So hi, Kelly. It's great to be here. And it's great to be here with today's guest. I have to say, I probably say this every time. It's just a rave to have this experience with all these fabulous women we've been talking to. And today's guest is Karine Jean-Pierre, who is a wonderful woman who right now is an executive at MoveOn and really fighting the good fight for justice every day in all kinds of contexts. And she's on a special book tour about her book, Moving Forward, which we'll get into later. But we thought that since our focus is really on the presidency and how we can get a woman elected next year, that we would start off with asking Karine to share with us her perspective. She worked in the White House for President Obama, and what it's like to work for a good president, right? And how great it'll be when we can do that again.
That was a long time ago. Well, first of all, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Rebecca, for having me on this wonderful podcast, an important podcast. I think we need to be having these conversations, and women should be first. I think we should be thinking about women all the time, especially in the space. We just have a really powerful political voice, and it should be known. So, going back feels like forever ago. Look, working for President Barack Obama, for many reasons for me, because I'm an immigrant and because being a black woman and at the time being young, it just meant so much. I worked on his presidential campaign in 2008 and also in 2012, and it was an honor. It was a privilege. When you walked through the gates to go into either EEOB, the Executive Eisenhower Office Building, or the West Wing, you understood the pride and the dignity of the office, that you were working on behalf, not just the president, but the people. And it came from the top down. And you were doing serious business. Obama was methodical. He was easily the smartest person in the room, and which we don't see that right now. And he was well learned. He understood history. He understood the Constitution, being a constitutional law professor, and he really respected the office that he held, and that is missing right now. And he was a president for everyone, not a small part of the population, small shrinking part of the population. And so that is what's missing. I think sometimes we take these things for granted. And we forget something that's also very important is that we are a young democracy. And, and when you think about it in that broad stroke, like what's going on right now is very dangerous and scary. And it is on us, on women, to really help save this country. And I say that in a very serious way. We got to get out there.
I want to follow up on that, actually. You had a piece in Vogue. It came out as we're talking. It's yesterday. By the time you hear this, it'll be a little bit longer. But you talk about being an immigrant and the importance of being an immigrant and the way that immigrants are being treated. But you actually talk a lot, too, about hope and why your family's story and what's happening now actually gives you a lot of hope. And I think that is something that, as I was reading it, I was like, I need this. Thank you. So I wonder if you could talk some about that, about how we can still feel hope right now.
Yeah. People ask me all the time, Karine, are you hopeful? Are you seriously hopeful? And I'm like, first of all, we have to be hopeful. Secondly, there have been things, if you look at the last 3 years, that has given me hope and encouragement. And in that piece, that Vogue piece, I talk about the Women's March. being a great indicator of what this country is all about or can be about now, right? When we talk about the direction of where we're going. And I just think about 24 hours prior to the Women's March, literally 24 hours, you had the President of the United States, the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania, talking about American carnage. And that was so depressing, so awful. And I didn't even know what to do when I heard that. And then fast forward to 24 hours later, you see the pink hats and you see women taking over Washington, D.C. and you feel hopeful and you think, this is what's going to help save us. And then that week, the following weekend, it was the Muslim ban and that was awful. And people came out organically. And they went to the airports. Lawyers offered their services. And you continue the Kavanaugh hearings. Even though Kavanaugh was still placed in the Supreme Court, I remember protesting in front of the SCOTUS building, Supreme Court building, and standing there with women. And they were telling their stories and they were being brave and courageous, and we were in the fight together. And so there's been numerous amount of times, and in the article I lean in on the Families Belong Together march that MoveOn and others held, and that really devastated me because being an immigrant and thinking, wow, if I had come here when I was 5, and I did, and we landed at JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport, and somebody said to me, we're going to separate you from your parents. And I thought that wasn't okay. And so I leaned in and offered my voice and my platform and went down to the border and we did a bunch of things there. And it was just an important moment. And we also did a Families Belong Together march and hundreds of thousands of people showed up across the country. And so those things make me hopeful. And also just the political electoral kind of climate that we've seen since 2017, winning Virginia in 2017, which is an indicator of what we saw in 2019 in Virginia being completely blue now, in Alabama winning that Senate race, that Senate race with Doug Jones, which had no business winning that. Kentucky just a few weeks ago, Louisiana just a few weeks ago, taking back the House, the amount of women that have jumped into the political arena and making history in 2018. I think you have to be hopeful.
So one of the things about being hopeful, and for our listeners, you should know that we're doing the podcast today after Karine and I did a book talk about her book, Moving Forward, which is just delightful, and I commend it to your attention. But one of the things we talked about earlier, and I want to ask her about, and so you all can hear this too, is that amidst this hope that I think we all feel sometimes we need to be reminded of, you share in the book some stories about a fairly hard-scrabble childhood, having a tough time as a teenager, having, it hasn't been all straight uphill to the Oval Office. And I wonder if you could share with us how you've maintained a sense of, I have the ability, I have the power, I have the strength, I have the discipline to overcome what I need to overcome to remain hopeful and to accomplish.
Yeah, so a lot of that resilience that we're talking about comes from my parents. Like I mentioned, immigrants, came from Haiti, and watching them throughout my life, even now till today, getting knocked down and having to get back up, being taken advantage of, and working so hard, 6-7 days a week. My dad, a New York City cab driver, my mom, a home health care aide, living check to check, and having to see that day to day taught me what life kind of was all about, but what it meant to kind of persevere and to stand up and to keep going and to, yes, life will knock you down, but you have to get back up. And for them, it was, we have to feed our children. We have to make sure we have a place to live. We have to just keep going, keep going, keep going. And I learned that just from them. It was a lesson, a very important lesson that I learned at a very young age and from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
How do you sort of take those lessons then? I know you have a daughter. Mm-hmm. I believe she's 5.
Yep, she is.
I have a 5-year-old and 8-year-old myself.
I love her tremendously. She's fantastic.
So I always like to ask other parents who are in politics sort of what your approach is to being in this political moment where we're trying to have hope, but there's a lot of ugliness. And how we raise kids to do, the way that your parents sort of helped you figure out how to have agency, like how we should be taking those lessons and passing them on to our children.
Yeah, I have to say, raising Soleil, that's my daughter who's 5, has been a great life lesson for me. Becoming a mom, great life lesson for me. Because while my parents instilled this kind of resilience and very hopeful, positive outlook on life and being a fighter, I was a very shy kid. I was incredibly shy. Didn't, always had to fight to get that confidence, all the time. I was teased. And I think that's why my parents really stepped in and tried to give me encouragement. But still, when you're teased at school, you're teased at school. Your parents it's hard for your parents to save you from that. And so raising Soleil, me and my partner, we are both very mindful and intent. We make sure that she feels like she has a voice and can be independent and share her feelings. We're very big on her using her words and being able to communicate with us. We want to give her confidence. We're always building up her confidence and we tell her, you can be president one day. Like I've been telling her that since she was a baby. And my partner's like, oh, come on. She's a baby. And I'm like, no. And I would tell her, you could be president one day. And it is things that boys hear all the time. They hear that all the time. We don't tell our girls that. And so that is the kind of the parenting that we have been doing. And she's this really independent, verbose young person, and she speaks her mind. And of course with boundaries, because, we're still her parents. But I couldn't be prouder of the work that we're both doing and that we're putting in. And it's also kind of nurturing her personality, because each kid has their own personality and you have to kind of figure out, and they have to figure it out. And so it's nurturing that and letting her be okay with who she is.
So one of the things you talk about related to this idea of being a child and growing up and developing confidence is the importance of sports. Mm-hmm. And I kind of resonated with that when I read it in the book, because when I was a kid, and I don't think I've ever told Kelly this one, but I was a competitive swimmer. Oh, wow. And it was such an important experience for me about discipline and accomplishment and all of that. And I know that you had a similar experience and continue to be a runner. And so I was wondering if you could share with our listeners about, what is it that sports does for girls and why it's so important.
I tell you, it saved me in high school. Like I said, I was a very shy kid, and I ran track and field and cross country, and I did that throughout my 4 years of high school. It created a community for me of friends. It gave me confidence because it's an individual sport as well as a team sport. So you're getting those awards. You're becoming the best at what you do, of whatever your race is or your competition is. And it's safe. It's a safe space. Mm-hmm. Some kids don't have anywhere to go after school because their parents are working, or they're stuck inside the house, or they have to be in a particular place so that their parents know where they are. And that's what it gave me. It gave me safety. It gave me friends. It gave me confidence. And it was an experience that I hope my daughter gets to have and other kids get to have. I talk about a funny thing in the book that really mattered. So when I became very good at the sport, at track and field and cross country, and they do this thing on Mondays after a track meet, the principal or whoever is in charge of doing this, I can't remember right now, they go on the PA, and as they're announcing the day's events for the school, they talk about the different sports. And if you won your meet or your race, your name gets called, and the sense of pride, because everyone in the school has now heard how great you did this weekend in this particular race. And so, that's another thing, it kind of also made me popular, which I had never ever been, and in a good way, in a good, healthy way. And and all of those things that I learned about the sport has given me a path to even my adulthood. I eat healthy. I'm very conscious of working out now and making sure that I take care of my body. And that all comes from running in high school.
So we've talked some about family and the importance of family as role models, but I wonder if you could talk too about professional mentors and people who've helped you along the way. I certainly don't come from a political family myself, and so finding people like Rebecca who have a little more experience in this has been really helpful. So talk to us some about that and finding those people in your life who can help you.
Let me tell you, being a mentor is such a key part of helping someone develop, especially young people. And if you can be a mentor to someone, please do that. It is a great way to kind of give back to someone who really needs it. For me, I talk about in my book about how I got into politics. It wasn't something that I thought about when I was in high school. I was not part of a political club, was not a legacy kid, was not thinking, oh, one day I'm going to be in politics or run for politics. I didn't get into it until my mid-20s when I was in grad school. And in grad school, I had these wonderful mentors who helped me set that path forward for me. And one of them was David Dinkins, the first African-American mayor of New York City. He was teaching at the school that I was getting my graduate degree from, Columbia University School of International Public Affairs. And I met this amazing, fiery, wonderful professor, Esther Fuchs, who was a professor at Barnard and also at Columbia. And they were both, very much involved in politics, clearly. And they said to me, you should, if you want to make a change, if you want to change lives, because at that point, I was not sure what I was going to do, and I'd gone to Haiti for the first time, and I got back. I was like, all right, I want to do something. I want to make a change. And they suggested, they're like, you could be part of policy making, be part of legislation, creating legislation. Maybe you will run one day. And so it was the best advice that I got. And they've been mentors to me throughout. They're very prominent in my book. And I appreciate the support that they have given me, not just telling me to go into politics, but throughout. And so having their mentorship, I don't know if I would have ended up in the White House without them.
One of the things about mentorship, and in my case, it was the first African-American mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington. And I can tell you a Harold David Dinkins story, actually, probably offline at this point. But one of the things that many of us who were mentored by Mayor Washington learned, and he used to say this, was politics ain't beanbag. And he also was very clear when he sat behind that big desk on the 5th floor of City Hall, and he asked you to come in to see him. But, it was not a relationship of equals. And of course, he knew things we didn't know and had to make decisions we were never going to have to make.
Right.
And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that idea of not only the mentor really giving to you, but at least I would say, you listening to that mentor, respecting the executive responsibility that person has. And in that context, because we're focused on electing a first woman executive, right? A first woman president. If you could talk a little bit about your idea of executive political power and how you see it.
Yeah, wow, that's a powerful question. I mean, it is, like you said, it's executive power. And for the elected officials that I've worked with, you really learn that very clearly. They are, I was talking about Barack Obama, the president, and how methodical he was. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is he knew, as commander-in-chief, as the president for the country, for everyone, there were decisions that were weighing on his shoulders that he had to make. And yes, we worked for him, and we basically pushed forward his platform and the people's business. But the decisions ended with him, right? He's the one that made the final decision. We helped, give him the information and the research that he needed, but he made that final. And you see that for every elected official that I've worked with. You see the struggle. Clearly, being the president is at the top of that level, but you see that and you learn. Like I think one of the things that people used to tell me all the time when I worked for Obama is like, oh, you're so even keel. You guys are just like Obama, because you take that on. It comes from the top. What we're doing here in the middle or at the bottom comes from the guidance that we're getting at the top. And you take that with you. And I really do feel from some of the best people that I've worked for in the political arena, I see myself, right? The methodical thinking, the really being purposeful and intent, watching how you speak, being careful about decisions that you make. And it really goes a long way, for me in my current situation and where I am today in my career.
So I've been lately very sort of reflective, perhaps overly optimistic that, a year from now, things will look a lot brighter. Yeah. But as organizers, how do we sort of keep going then after the 2020 election?
Yeah, it's so funny. Someone at one of my book events in Atlanta, it was the last question that I got, and this woman stood up and she said, will things really change even if there's a Democrat in office after 2020? And I thought about it, and she made such a good point. And I've been processing it since she asked. And I thought, we're so focused on, we got to get him out. We got to get him out. We got to get him out. 2020, November 2020, that I don't think there's been a conversation about, well, what happens? What happens after 2020? And that's a good conversation to be had, because there are two things. If he gets reelected, what does that mean for our advocacy? What does that mean for what we do? And that's a real conversation to have. And if we do get a Democrat, whoever that is, hopefully, we're trying to elect women, what does that mean? And my answer to her was, I said, you're making a really excellent point. And the fight doesn't end if we get a Democratic president. We have to continue to push to build that movement to make sure that things are getting done, because the damage that has been done in the last 3 years are so major, are so big, that incremental change is not the way we're going to get back. We're going to have to force that person to make big, bold changes. Domestically, foreign, our allies, they're not going to trust us. It doesn't matter if we elect a saint. They're going to be like, oh no, we don't know. We're like, what is up wrong with you guys after what you've done to us the last 4 years? So it's going to be a lot of work for that president. And we are going to have to hold their feet to the fire and push them and make sure that we are being heard. And it's probably going to be a tougher fight this time next year on how we're moving the country forward. Yes, hopefully we'll have a successful election and we'll take our country back, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I mean, there was an article that I read where there's like over 100,000 foster kids now, or kids that have no home because of the separation at the border. Right. Like, how do we fix that? How is that going to be fixed?
Right. And speaking of that work and how these enormous problems are going to be remedied, we're going to think positive about this, or at least for this point in the conversation. And because there is so much to do, and because we do also have this real opportunity to elect a woman, remember, we've never, ever been in this position with 3 very well-qualified women on the Democratic side. Could you talk a little bit about that agenda for our listeners, who I think are predominantly women, predominantly activists? So how do we tackle our issues? How should we talk about them? If you were sitting there and advising her, whoever her, what would you say to her about speaking to the women who will have elected her?
Yeah. And that's the thing, women are going to have such a powerful role in electing the next president. Exactly. We will be the deciding factor, full stop. We will be the deciding factor. And whichever one of the hers who are in the in the primary right now, they have to really make that connection. They have to connect and make that loud and clear, the importance of having women, their voices in this particular fight, and what they're going to do and what that means to elevate all of us. And it's the hard part that's happening, and I see this all the time, is that because Donald Trump is kind of in the room, and because he is the thing that everybody is scared of, people are just thinking, I don't want to make history right now. I just want to get rid of this guy. And it's almost as if that's the focus. So what these women have to do is to say, no. We're not going to play the same playbook. Right. We don't need a guy to beat Donald Trump, because that's the thinking. Yeah. And that a woman could do it. And I have to tell you, all those women that are the 3 women that are in this race that's kind of looming above this conversation, they can beat Donald Trump. And that's the thing that makes me so annoyed, is this electability conversation, which is totally BS. The likability, totally BS. It's just a way to say, oh, women can't win, which is not true. I mean, we see head-to-head polling, and I don't like to lean on those too much, on polling in general, but women beat Donald Trump.
That's right. Well, any one of the 3 of them.
Any one of those 3 of them can beat Donald Trump. Yeah. The question is, well, then whoever's the nominee, can they build a movement? It is going to take a movement to win in 2020. They have to be able to create a movement, and that's bringing out everyone, that coalition, to win. So you got to motivate. You got to inspire. You got to live in your truth. You got to be authentic, your real authentic self. That's what resonates with us.
Right. It's when people feel, yes, she can, right?
Right.
That's how we have to feel as we move into this year. Well, Kelly and I want to thank you for joining us. It's been big fun and very inspirational.
How do people get the book?
Oh, you can get the book anywhere. Go to your independent bookstore, support your independent bookstore, but you can get it online. You can go to my website, www.KarineJean-Pierre.com. I'm sorry for the long website. Some people want to get it at Amazon if you want, or support your bookstore, your local bookstore, independent bookstore. But it's out there. I'm on my tour. Come see me. Come hang out with me. I love to take pictures, and apparently I write too much in the books to people. I get told that.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
ladies.
Karine.
Appreciate it.
The Vote Her In segment is a collaboration of Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. Our theme song is called Are You Listening, off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.